We met in college. He reached out to me first, trying to flirt. He was sweet, charming, and pretty cute, but I wasn't the kind of girl who paid much attention to boys back then. In fact, I was an introvert through and through, and I had no intention of dating anyone. Despite getting attention from guys, I was laser focused on my studies, determined to get straight A's and build a secure future. You see, my parents struggled financially for as long as I could remember, and they sacrificed everything for my education. Their dedication gave me a level of maturity beyond my years. My number one priority was to create a life where I never had to worry about money like they did. Love, romance, that could wait. But he was persistent. At first, we were just friends, the kind of friends who clicked instantly. I wasn't looking for love, but somehow in the safety and comfort of our friendship, I found myself falling for him after a year of knowing each other. He was always there for me, always someone I could trust, and eventually, I couldn't help it. I melted. We were inseparable, sharing lunches, study sessions, and cheap dates. We didn't have much, but it was enough. He was enough. I thought we were perfect together. After graduation, things began to change a little. He had his sights set on an MBA, wanting to build a stable, successful future for us. I was thrilled at the idea, proud that he was thinking about our future together. He wanted us to be happy, he said. He wanted us to be secure. So I supported him fully, waking up at ungodly hours like 2 a.m. to help with his preparations. I wrote his applications, kept him company during his sleepless nights of studying, and pushed him when he felt too tired to continue. It was a tough time, I won't lie. There were days I felt incredibly lonely because most of his time was spent focusing on the MBA. But I reminded myself that he was doing this for us. He was building a better life for our future together. When he got accepted into a prestigious program, I was over the moon. It was validation for all the hard work we had put in. The only downside was that now we'd have to do long distance. He moved away for the program, but we didn't let the distance get in our way. I still felt connected to him, even if we weren't physically together. I continued supporting him in any way I could, writing papers, preparing his presentations, helping with his research, and even sitting with him on Zoom all night during his deadlines. I was his rock. I made sure he woke up on time for his early morning meetings, and I kept him motivated. He always expressed his gratitude, telling me how lucky he was to have me. He didn't have much support from his parents growing up, so he often said I was his family now. It felt like us against the world. When he finally graduated and landed a job as an international sales manager at a reputable company, I couldn't have been prouder. He was on his way to becoming the man he always wanted to be. Since his new job involved a lot of travel, I made this tough decision to switch jobs myself. I found a position that allowed me to work from home so we can finally live together whenever he was in town. Those were some of the happiest months of our relationship. We met each other's parents, went on a vacation abroad, and attended his brother's wedding, where I was introduced as the next bride. We even started talking about getting a dog together. It felt like all our dreams were falling into place. But then, slowly, things started to change. His job required him to travel internationally for about 10 days every month. At first, I missed him terribly, but we stayed in touch. He would text me, video call me, and tell me how much he hated being away from me. He said he didn't even bother sightseeing because the only place he wanted to be was with me. His words were like balm to my heart during those long, lonely days. I believed him. I cried from the loneliness, but I knew this was just a phase. I told myself that once he settled into the job, things would get better. But instead, they got worse. Over the next 6 months, I noticed subtle changes in his behavior. He was glued to his phone, even on weekends, always answering work calls. He was distracted, distant. I tried to make things better by cooking his favorite meals when he returned from his trips, planning date nights, and even dressing up just for him. But every time I suggested going out, he would say, "Let's just order in and watch a movie." For 6 months, we barely went out together. He didn't seem to notice me anymore. I brought it up, and he'd always have an excuse. His deals at work were in the final stages, and they were worth millions. He was under a lot of pressure, he said. Just give me 1 more month, and I'll turn things around. He promised. I wanted nothing more than his time and attention. I was practically begging him for it at this point. But I still trusted him, believed in the man I had fallen in love with back in college. Then came that day that changed everything. I had a fever the night before he left for yet another business trip. I was sick, weak, and desperately hoping he would show some concern. But instead, he packed his bags, kissed me on the forehead, and said, "You're strong, my girl. You'll be fine." And then he was gone. No medicine. No call to check on me once he landed. Nothing. 10 hours later, when he finally called, I asked, "Didn't you care about how I was feeling?" His response was like a punch to the gut. "Why are you always complaining? You never support me when I need it. This deal is crucial, and I was in meetings all day. Stop making this about you." I was shattered. He extended his trip by another week, and I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe he just didn't want to come back home. When he finally did return, he acted like nothing had happened. He apologized, told me he loved me, and said he was sorry for being distant. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to trust again. But then, while he was napping that afternoon, I noticed a message pop up on his phone. It was from someone on Instagram, and it read, "Ha ha ha, I won't keep you waiting next week when you're here. Heart emoji." My heart stopped. We had always shared passwords, so I opened the chat. What I found sent my entire world crashing down around me. The messages went back 2 weeks with him sending pictures from a business event and making dinner plans with her. She looked like an Instagram model, and I couldn't believe it. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I woke him up, heart pounding, and asked him about the messages. His face went pale. He stammered out some story about how they met at the hotel, how she asked for his contact info, and how nothing had happened between them. He blocked her immediately and cried, telling me he felt trapped. He blamed me for complaining too much, for not supporting him. He said his deals were dragging on and he needed an ego boost. He was just looking for a quick confidence boost, he said. He was sorry. He begged me for another chance, saying he loved me and no one else. For 3 days, he apologized nonstop, crying, slapping himself, kissing my feet, anything to prove how sorry he was. And I didn't want to throw away everything we had for one mistake. I loved him. He promised to change. For 3 days, he was attentive, caring. He even made dinner and took me out on a date. It almost felt like the old him again. But deep down, something didn't feel right. My instincts wouldn't let me rest. I reached out to the girl from Instagram, hoping for some clarity. What she told me crushed whatever hope I had left. They hadn't just met by chance. They had matched on a dating app. He had hidden all our posts together from his profile to make himself look single. She sent me screenshots of their conversations going back 6 months. 6 months! He had been lying to me the entire time. My stomach twisted in knots as I read through those desperate, flirty messages. He wasn't just a guy who made one mistake. He had been living a double life. I got the screenshots at 5 a.m., and in that moment, I knew I was done. I woke him up and kissed him one last time. We had sex, I made him breakfast, and I watched him leave for work, thinking he had convinced me to stay. Then I packed my bags and I left without a word. I didn't owe him an explanation. When he called me later, I didn't pick up. When he called my parents, I told him, "I know you've been on dating apps for a long time. I don't care if you die." And then I blocked him on everything. I'm still going through the whirlwind of emotions. I feel used, discarded, ugly. I devoted myself to him for 7 years, and he turned out to be just another player looking for a thrill. I'm glad I caught it before we got married, but I can't stop thinking about all the time we spent together, all the memories we made. Why did he choose to betray me like this? I know I made the right decision, but moving on feels like the hardest thing I've ever had to do. This guy found out in a dramatic fashion that his girlfriend was cheating on him with a guy from his sport rec league. Check out this video to find out the wild details.